Okay, so good afternoon and welcome for our session today, all about substantive test of transaction part 2. Okay, so our main focus will be on accounts which included in statement of financial position. Okay, so that means we will talk about assets, liabilities, and equity. Okay, so take note that our focus on auditing or doing substantive procedure or substantive test of details is focusing on assertion, which will affect the account balances. So when we talk about this, you have to recall what we discussed about assertion, like existence, occurrence, rights and obligations, classification, accuracy, valuation, and allocation, presentation, and disclosures, including cutoff, completeness, etc. So that will be the focus of the discussion. So we have to identify the account, what will be the assertion, and what will be the best or at least the appropriate audit procedure to test those assertions. Okay. So as the current practice of audit is focusing on risk-based audit. So it means that our main aim or our main approach in audit is to identify whether the accounts will have or possibility of risk. Okay, risk of material misstatement, which means there might be some mistake, error, undervaluation, or overvaluation on accounts. And coming back to materiality, we talk about materiality. It depends on the professional judgment of the auditor. Okay, so we cannot really set a particular excuse me fixed guideline on that. Now, in relationship of risk on substantive work, so remember our audit risk function. So in audit risk function, if you have both inherent and control risk high, detection risk will be low. So which means if detection risk will be low, you need to perform extensive testing. Okay, but if the detection risk will be high, that means inherent risk and control risk will be both low. So detection risk will be high. You don't need to perform so much on substantive procedures. Okay, so remember that that might be one of the issues that you need to face in planning the audit. Next is when you remember we talk about timing of the procedures. Uh, in the timing of procedures, the riskier the account, the closer the account will be, or the closer, sorry, the more that we need to audit the account close to or at year end. Okay, the riskier, the audit procedure should be performed near year end. The low risk, you can do it at interim period. So it means maybe 3-4 months before the year end. Okay. But for risky accounts, it usually will be falling maybe a month before or after or within that range of the balance date. Now, in designing audit procedure, as I mentioned, you use the risk. That will be your main aim in determining how much audit you need and what will be the scope of the audit. And another thing is if there will be a strong internal audit in the company, we can leverage that work because primarily the internal audit also work as a review function of the governance or the directors in checking accounts. So if they have a strong internal control, we can also, sorry, internal audit function, we can use some of their work. But before you absorb the work of the internal auditor, remember, you have to check their competency, their independence level, and how much resources that they are using. Same with what we're doing. Okay, so do we have the competence, independence, and these things? Now let's start discussing one by one the accounts. Okay, so first is auditing cash and cash equivalent. So now, the approach that we will do is like this again. Identify the accounts, what will be the assertion related to that, and what will be the possible audit procedure that we can perform. Okay, clear? That also is a requirement on your assessment, that last assessment. Because in your meeting, what you will do is identify the accounts, and then what will be the audit procedure, sorry, assertion that you will need to test, and audit procedure. So clear? Right. So for cash, the key focus will be on these three. I'm not saying don't test other assertion, but mainly the assertion that you need to audit will be existence, completeness, and classification. Okay, so when you talk about existence, so sorry, am I clear on the approach? Account, assertion, and next when I say assertion, and then procedure. Okay. So in existence, why do we need to test existence? Sometimes the auditor, sorry, the client may just say they have this asset, particularly cash. Okay. So as our work as an auditor, we need to do procedure. So the procedure that we can use will be external confirmation. We will send letter to the bank asking directly whether the company as at a particular period, let us say 31st December 2025, do they have that cash balance as at that period? Okay, on their account. So send confirmation letter. We receive it directly from the bank. Clear? Am I clear on that procedure? So that's the one of the procedures you can perform. You can also confirm balances, loans, and pledges if the company had asked or obtained a loan from the bank. We can also confirm that. Okay. Another thing is that when we send confirmation letter, we can identify some restrictions because the company might be saying, yes, we have the money in the bank, but the bank would say this is under a particular restriction. Okay, maybe under the escrow fund or trust fund that the client, our client, cannot touch unless they fulfill certain obligation. So that is what we call restrictions. So we have also to identify if the company or our client is restricted on using cash. Because if it is restricted, it should not be classified as cash. It should be classified somewhere else. Clear? So why is it that it is important for us to properly classify cash? Because remember, cash is the most liquid asset. So we always say if you got more cash, it's easy for you to run the business. If they're reporting a particular, let us say 50% of cash, but there will be restrictions. Okay, so it's really like a wrong or misstatement. Okay, that is misstatement because if 50% of cash is restricted, it should be classified in a different account, not under cash. Maybe short-term investment or long-term investment or other accounts. Okay, but not cash. Cash is by definition. I think you're studying it in your financial accounting. By definition, it should be money or bills that is unrestricted, for use. Okay, am I correct? That's what you define cash, right? Next. Now, with regards to completeness, how to test completeness? When you say completeness, all that the cash reported, sorry, all that transaction related to cash had been recorded. Okay, clear? So that's the assertion. So what we're trying to say is any cash, sorry, the cash that's reported in the balance sheet or the client is reporting, they are saying that all have been recorded. So what you will do is to perform your favorite in financial accounting. What's your favorite there? Bank reconciliation. Okay. So why we are performing bank reconciliation? We are performing bank reconciliation because we're trying to figure out whether the checks that we issued had been cleared by in the bank or the EFTS, or any deposit that we sent to the bank had been cleared in the bank statement. And at the same time, any collection made by the company, sorry, by our customer through our bank will be recorded in our ledger because sometimes we don't have that luxury of knowing whether the customer had paid directly to the bank. And any expenses that the bank paid on behalf of our client or bank. So that is the way we use bank reconciliation. Bank reconciliation is the best test whether there are money missing. Okay, there's an extended version of that. We call it proof of cash. Proof of cash is like 2, 3, or more bank reconciliation. It's really extensive. If you do that in practical auditing, you will know where the money is going, or you will identify how much money is missing. We call it proof of cash. It's an extended bank reconciliation. Okay, that's usually taught in audit practice, okay, which we don't have here. Okay, so fortunately, maybe at the professional level you will have it. Okay, classification and disclosure, we just have to, same thing that I mentioned. If the cash is restricted, we classify it in a different account. So clear on cash? So easy to know, okay, the flow of the discussion that I'm doing, identify the account, then what are the assertion affected or will be tested, and how to test the audit procedure. Clear? Account, assertion, audit procedure. Okay. Next is accounts receivable. You can see that this discussion is really fast. Okay. Uh, in auditing accounts receivable, there are two assertions that you want to test. One is basically existence. Existence of what? Existence of that particular balance or account, especially on customer. Okay. And then valuation and allocation, because you have to test whether those accounts or sorry, those debtors or accounts receivable will be or can be collected, okay, or the full amount can be collected. That's why you have another favorite in financial accounting, aging of receivables, allowance for doubtful debts. Okay. Now, so existence. So am I clear on existence? Uh, we just have to identify whether that balance pertaining to an existing customer. Because again, the client might be naming names included in the subsidiary ledger, saying, okay, customer A, B, C, D. These are the amount we will collect from these customers. So our role as an auditor is to help them to prove that this customer actually exists. Okay. So what we will do is to send confirmation letter, and I think I have given you an overview before on confirmation letter. So what we will do here is we send confirmation letter to the customer of our client. Why do we need to do that? So we just have to confirm whether that particular customer exists. If that customer exists, then the accounts receivable is correct. Sorry, at least we know that there's a transaction between the company and the customer. Okay? So we send that. We have positive confirmation and negative confirmations. Positive confirmation is one we send where we require the client to respond back. Or sorry, the customer of our client to respond back. What does it mean? When we send confirmation to that customer, we are requesting them to respond back on that letter. It is used for high risk account. What are the high risk account that we will know? Like big amount? Yes? That's it. Okay, so the amount will be the basis of the risk, right? One materiality. So if that customer has, let us say, 10% of the total receivables of our client, do you think it's really needed for us to know whether that customer exists? Yes, 10%. Okay, so material, right? So send confirmation letter and request them to respond back. Okay. Negative confirmation is will be sent to a customer that we think it's not really risky. Like for example, if it is out of 10 million kina receivables, one customer still owes like around 50 kina. Okay, but actually 50 kina, okay, let's make it higher, 100 kina. We'll send confirmation letter. We are not expecting that individual to respond because that 100 kina may not be that much, right? Okay, so, but take note, if so, out of 10 million kina worth of receivables, those customers with 100 kina receivables or outstanding, they will be like around, let us say 10,000 like that, like 10,000 customers like that. So 10,000 multiplied by 100, that's around 1 million, right? Around 1 million. Do you think that we still need at least portion of them to respond? Yes, because if you add all these accounts, it will be material, right? So don't look into individual or only, look into the total picture. If we add all these accounts, will that be material? Yes. If yes, then maybe ask few individuals to respond. Okay. Sorry. Before that, you can watch a documentary Barry Min Go. Barry Min Go. I think I mentioned it before, but if I miss, you can actually watch a documentary. Search it in YouTube. One who had used this confirmation as uh, he used this as a tool, okay, to prove that he's rich. But actually, he doesn't have customers. Okay, what he did is he created a list of customers and they said, I have receivables on this, this, and this, and this. So what auditor did, they sent confirmation letter to those customers that he listed. Then he is the one answering the confirmation letter. So one by one is writing and then getting the letter answering. And then responded back to the auditor. The auditor said, yes, you have customers. Good. So your receivables are true. So if the receivable is true, that will be related to sales. Am I correct? Okay, so because accounts receivable is related to sales. Is it? Yes, so that's how it works, right? Receivables and sales. So when he made that, what happened is that he somehow proved that the sales that he recorded is correct. Why? Because it is related to receivables. So if that in that case, what will happen with the sales? That actually sales will be part of the calculation of profit. And he inflated the sales, what will happen? The profit also will go up. Trick, good trick. So what will you do? We will create a company and then we'll name individual Port Moresby. Then along the way we'll get all the letters Port Moresby. Right? Anyway. Am I clear on how it works? Okay. I'm not telling you to do for you to do this. I'm telling you that there's a loophole on that process. Okay. So that's why you don't just rely on one procedure. You need to perform other alternative procedures. Okay. Next, valuation and collectibility. So in valuation and collectibility, with regards to collectibility, remember I said about aging of receivables, allowance for doubtful debts. Okay. Now, you already done with receivables, right? In financial accounting. Yes. You want or you want to forget? Is it a nightmare or what? All right. So in receivables, remember, they will give you percentages, right? Am I correct? Are they giving you percentages there, like estimate, uncollectible, right? No one. No estimate, no percentage. Aging of receivables. I'm talking to accounting students, so I'm just checking. So you learn in allowance method that there will be percentages, right? Correct? Now, I want to ask a question. Who set the percentages? Uh, who set the percentages of uncollectibility? Bureau auditor. Who set? Huh? The management, right? Who else? They will be the one to set it, right? So the management will say, uncollectible, we have discredited sales, probably will not collect 5% of that. Am I correct? What's happening? Holiday mode. Anyway, but that those percentages that provided to you by your client should be tested. So you will ask, what is the basis of the percentages that you provide? Because someone has to decide, right? In business, someone has to decide. It's not like the accountant will just come up with the figure and then says, no one's giving the percentage, so I'll just say 20%. No, someone needs to decide. So if they set those percentages, you need to find at least a decision, maybe a minutes of the meeting or a memorandum written by CEO or given by the CFO that this is the percentage of uncollectibility. And then you have to find out how they decided what percentage will be. Like for example, for past 10 years, through their credit analysis, they found out that on an average, they will have 5% uncollectible account. At least there is a basis. Why? Okay, what's the journal entry for uncollectible accounts using allowance method? Debit, bad debts expense, right? Correct? And then credit, allowance for doubtful debts. Sometimes they call it uncollectible doubts, uncollectible uh, accounts expense. Sorry, allowance for uncollectible accounts. Okay. If I am the part of the management and I want to lower the income, what I will do? Because no one's questioning my estimate, right? So can I say credit sales 10% of credit sales? Be fine? No one's questioning. So let us say your credit sales will be 10 million kina. And then you set a 10% uncollectible. How much will it be? 1 million, right? In a company with, let us say, the profit is, say the profit will be 15 million, excluding this yet. So we are not yet recording. If I deduct that 1 million, how much is the difference? That will be 14 million, right? A huge difference because no one is questioning about how or who determined the percentage and how they determined it. This is one of the tricks that I want future auditors to look into because the estimate is one of the issues that you may face during the audit because you have to ask, why 10%? Okay, if I make it maybe 2%, is the real percentage or at least the closer to reality 2%. So out of 10 million kina, that will be 200,000. This is the more realistic than 10%. If I compare that, 15 million less 200,000 here, that will be what? That will be 14,800 here. There's a huge difference between this and this. Clear? Future accountants, these are so many tricks that the management can do. Okay, if they really want to reduce the profit. Why they're reducing the profit? One of the ways is they don't want to be found suspicious. If they have large profit, sometimes some like reporters or government will see, hey, you're profiting too much. Okay, so we got our eyes on you. Okay. Anyway, when you reach final year, you will learn about what I'm talking about. I don't know if you want to push through after this or in final year. Hey, anyway, uh, there's a saying: if a tree got lots of fruits, it's all constantly being thrown with stones, right? Is it? Or you don't use stones, you get another fruit and throw the fruit in to get another fruit. Is it? Same thing. If the company is profitable, it will be always be seen. Okay? Like Google, Facebook, Meta. Anyway, yes. But what my point is, who make this estimate? Future auditors, you have to find out. Because that will affect valuation. You see, here I said if the allowance for doubtful debt is 1 million, that already 1 million will be deducted to receivables. So it will reduce the receivables. Got it, huh? Okay. What else? So that the methods to do that is to check subsequent receipt testing, vouching payments received after a year. Vouching is you go to the ledger and then you try to check the source document. Okay, why you're doing that? So from ledger to source document, because if they want to overstate the receivables, they might be recording subsequent payments, sorry, subsequent sales. Okay, so if they want to inflate receivables, they will include, for example, 31st December is the cutoff. They will include maybe 3rd January sales, credit sale. Then it will inflate the receivables and the sale. So for you to do that, you trace. Okay, so this is the recorded amount in general ledger. I will check the supporting document if the date is correct. Another one. If you want to test whether there is a receivable, right, that is not recorded, you check subsequent receipt. Why you want to check subsequent receipt? If there is no sale, there is no receipt. Correct? So if that particular account is not recorded in the receivables, then they have subsequent receipt. When I say subsequent receipt, it was collected after balance date, which is not recorded. That receipt is not recorded on as at balance date. So we will be suspicious. Why? We have subsequent receipt, which is not coming from receivables. Got it, huh? And there is no cash sales during that period. So suspicious, right? So subsequent receipt. You can also do analytical procedure for allowance for doubtful accounts. To test whether that 10% is realistic or 2% is the one realistic. So you do analytical procedure. So what does it mean? You need to perform your own aging of receivable analysis. Okay? Still wondering, you never discuss about aging of receivables. Did you?
Yes, we did. We did.
Okay, just checking. I might be talking a different because I know what already covered in financial accounting. Advantage of the one who designed the unit. Next, you also have to test whether the company has the right pay on that receivable. When you say right, of course, that is contractual right because when you send in when the company send invoice, that is what we call contractual obligation pay of the customer. So when we issue or when the client issued the invoice, we will know that the company is expecting this customer to pay. If they listed that that's a customer A, but customer A we cannot find in the invoices that they issued, how can we say that this customer A is what will be obliged to pay our client if they don't have name in the invoice? For example, customer A, it was mentioned in the subsidiary ledger. Customer A owes 10,000 kina. But we're trying to find customer A in the invoice list. Okay, when you're using accounting software, you just type the name. Okay, type the name of the customer, you will find, okay, so no customer A mentioned there. So why is it that the client is mentioning customer A that they having receivables, but no invoice was issued? Clear? Am I clear? Same thing. For example, in your case, as a student, we will send you or you will receive invoice first, right, before you pay. Okay. So if one student in our system is appearing having outstanding balance like this, but when we run the invoice list, no name appearing on this particular student. So why? There might be a mistake on recording. You got it, huh? Okay. So that's another thing that you have to do. Next, inventory. Really fast, huh? Okay. Inventory, of course, the assertion that you want to test is existence, valuation, and allocation. Existence, that's obvious for inventory. Okay. So your audit procedure is to attend physical stock take or the physical inventory count. Take note, you just have to attend. Why you attending? First, you want to see the physical physical inventory, and second, you have to observe if the process had been followed. Because remember, you are observing how they're doing the stock take. Huh? So normally in stock take, there will be two individuals. One is the one counting, one is the one taking the number. Okay, clear? So you as an auditor, you have to observe and see whether they're counting it right. Okay, clear? You can also do what we call test count. Test count is where you're not supposed to count all the inventories there. For example, one segment you will try to cross check. You're allowed to do that. So for example, they already counted 10 on this particular area, 10 inventory. Okay, that's 10 mobile phones. So you as an auditor, you will also count physically. Not all the inventory is there. Test count is only performed just to check whether the count is correct. Correct? So I remember this one. I went to a warehouse. We're doing observing stock take of those metals, those long bars. This okay. So they're importing that, and with that I learned so many names of the metals. Okay, like the alloys and combination. I've learned so many. Is that the word though? I never learned that. Anyway, and then you have to remember they will count. You observe, check. Okay, so someone's counting, someone's recording. You can even look. Sorry, someone's counting or someone's writing. So you can cross check what they're doing. But I have to do test count. Remember, I told you it's a so doing test count on during that time, the metals are so heavy. Okay, so as an auditor, you have to count. Okay, so really heavy. Okay, at least because there will be like stacked together. Sometimes there will be like one. It's really quite difficult to see whether that's correct number. Okay, heavy. But I did. Okay, but I learned. Okay, I learned that when it comes to metal, there are different names, and it depends on the name. The durability also it depends on the combination of metals. Okay? Because it's not only plainly iron. Okay, one metal will have iron mixed with other metals, and because of that, it becomes durable. Good thing in audit, you will learn so much. Something that you're not used. So clear on physical attendance on stock take. Text. Cyclical counting versus annual stock take based on control strength. Now we can have our client if they have a strong internal control, again based on your assessment. Okay, you discover that based on your control assessment, they have a strong control. Maybe annual stock take will do. But if they don't have a strong control, they might be doing cyclical count, like maybe monthly or quarterly. Okay, so that's the number of count per year will still depends on how the controls are implemented by the client. Okay, so we would suggest constant, like maybe quarterly count, okay, of the inventory if we've seen there's a weakness in the process, okay, to prevent theft or something, right? Now, evaluation, cost versus net realizable value. So how can we do that? Is how we will proceed is we test the initial cost. So remember vouching as mentioned, go from ledger to the source document. Okay, ledger, journal, source document. Okay, right. So we'll check. Okay, so this is the valuation of inventory based on ledger. We'll check in the journal. So the journal will show when they purchase it, what is the order number and these things, and then go to the source doc. Okay. Now lower cost and net realizable value. Hopefully you learned this in your unit. I know. Okay. So cost is of course the initial cost, how much they purchase plus incidental cost. Okay. Net realizable value is where we are or the client is measuring their inventory based on the selling price less any cost that they need to incur just to sell that product. That is what we call net realizable value. Okay, so if they're using lower of cost and net realizable value, we have to test whether they follow that strictly. Okay. How about obsolete and slow moving stock? Okay. So in determining obsolete and slow moving stock, so we can use or we can look into the stock register, or sometimes they call it inventory ledger or inventory register. Inventory registry. To determine any slow moving items. And also because we want to know whether that inventory is subject to impairment. Okay? Impairment, I believe you haven't discussed thoroughly. But when you talk about impairment, we are measuring whether this item will be able to provide us, or this item will be able to provide our client with expected benefits. Okay. So how does it work? In inventory, for example, your customer had bought, let's say, a mobile phone, brick phone. Okay, that let us say during that time, 10 years ago, that brick phone is costed our client around 580 brick phone. Okay, so they still have that in their inventory. But do you think in the future, or let us say currently, after 10 years, they are still keeping it at 500 kina? But do you think that brick phone will really cost 500 kina on the current year or current day? brick phone, you will buy 500 kina. The button phone, you will buy. I have brick. To buy 500 kina, I'll sell it. Okay. That usually costs around how much now? 30 kina? Okay. So that is what we call impairment because we cannot sell or the client cannot sell that at 500 kina when they bought it 10 years ago. So we need to tell them you have to subject that to impairment. You can still sell it, but you cannot sell it at 500, more than 500 kina. Clear? Am I clear on impairment? Impairment is saying how much how much will be the benefit of that particular asset. Okay, expected benefit. Okay. Do you think that that mobile phone, button phone, which costing 500 kina before, will have the same benefit now? And someone's still willing to buy it at 500 kina? Yes or no? No. So impairment and obsolescence. Huh? Am I clear? Okay. Next. Another important aspect of inventory, and this is not the primary, but then again you have to test rights over that particular inventory. We need to know whether the client has the right over that property or over that inventory. Are you familiar with consignment agreement? In consignment, what happens is that, for example, we have built your sales company. So we will take an inventory coming from a different dealer or manufacturer, but we don't own that inventory. We are just holding that inventory for sale. So when we are preparing our financial statement, we are not supposed to record that as part of our asset. Why? Because we are only holding that for consignment, which means our work on that inventory is to hold it and sell it and get commission. Clear? Question: do they have the right over that asset? Over that inventory? Answer: no. Yes, they need to sell it, but they are not the owner of that asset. It's owned by another entity. So when the company is reporting, they are not supposed to include that as part of the inventory. That is what we call testing the rights over the asset. Clear? Is it clear? For example, in printing, the printing company, they will so-called lend the printer to a company. And then what will happen in that scheme is that we will not ask you to pay for the printer, but any services and these things, ink, you will buy from us. Got it? So they don't own the printer, but those toner, ink, will be purchased directly to the company. So if I'm the one holding on to the printer, I'm not supposed to record that as part of the property or asset. Why? Because I don't own that particular printer, and even we don't have that lease agreement, so it's just provided to us. Okay, so you have to determine whether they have the right. Next, property planning agreement is the easiest because it's quite straightforward. So we will just test existence and valuation. Existence, I don't need to explain why. But when you are doing audit, the first year of audit, you need to physically cite the property or plant and equipment. What does it mean? You cannot just rely on photographs or this story or papers. You have to see it physically. First audit, in the first audit. Next audit, you just have to reconfirm. But if they acquire new property or new equipment, then you have to cite again. Sorry, you have to cite it initially. When they acquire new equipment. First year audit. Subsequent, you just have to do some testing, okay? Yes, we know that there is a property there or there's an equipment, we already knew. Okay, so we just have to cross-check with the registry because you already have tested that, right? Now, recurring audit, if you're doing it, you have to focus on additions and disposals. Okay? If they acquired a new equipment, then we inspect the new equipment. If they dispose, they just have to check whether that equipment is not there anymore. Okay, and also check the paperwork. Must have mentioned something. Wait, remember. When I was in audit, we had invited to audit a restaurant. Okay, a good restaurant, really high class, a popular restaurant. Okay. Then when we were asked to audit, what the first thing that we did is basically citing those tools, sorry, utensils, cutleries, and these things, uh, pots, uh, oven, stove, all this, okay. And then we did some inventory, okay. And so they have the register. We did physical citing of the equipment, all those tools, sorry, those cutleries and ovens and stoves and chairs, tables. We did a catalog of all those, and then we sent. Okay? So this initial, we will set this our initial year of audit. These are the equipment, properties, and machineries that you have. Okay, so that's what we did. That's a good experience actually. Okay? So free food. I told you it's a really high class restaurant, really popular on that area. Okay, that where celebrities, okay, those famous guys are eating on that restaurant, and it's the first time. All right. So evaluation, your favorite depreciation, calculation of depreciation, it's there. Okay. So recalculating depreciation is one of the steps that you need to do just to test whether they are calculating it right. Okay. Now for additions, you have to take again ledger. If they recorded in ledger, trace to journal. Journal will provide you with the number of the invoice. So vouching. Clear? Okay. All this is really fun to do. Check, check, check. It's a bit tiring, but it's fun. I almost stayed as auditor, but I don't know. Someone pushed me in teaching. You go teach it. I don't know what that really happened. Anyway, rights and obligations. Verifying legal title and identifying liens or security interests, particularly on property. Okay, so we have to check. This is normally, particularly on real estate, we need to know, or the lands, okay? We need to know whether the land is under mortgage. Because after that, we can cross-check any loans recorded or mortgage recorded in the balance sheet. Okay, that's cross-checking. What else? Okay, accounts payable and liabilities. Accounts payable and liabilities, it's really pretty straightforward because they almost have the same characteristics. Unlike in assets, okay, we have different ways. Like cash, we do it in a different way. An audit, receivables, we do it in a different way. In payables and liabilities, is really straight. They will have the same characteristics, so it's easy for us to know what are the audit procedure that we will perform. Okay. The major assertion that will be affected on payables is admitting that you have liability. Okay, I'll ask you one thing. Sometimes you're borrowing money from your friends, right? So, then I reminded that you borrowed your place. Later your friend will collect. Anyway, so you borrowed money from your friends. Will there be possibility that you may have forgotten that you borrowed money from your friend? I don't want you to answer it, but just think about it. There will be high risk or possibility that you might forget that you owe money to your friend. I'm not blaming you. It's a human nature, okay? No one can blame you on that. But when it comes to collection, easy to remember, right? Hey, you haven't paid me. Okay. That's why, remember, in receivables, I never mentioned completeness. I only said about existence and valuation. But in payable, it's different. I said human nature. Even companies will be like that. They may have forgotten to include the loans that they obtain. So the major assertion that you will test in payable will be completeness. All the receivables that had occurred, they happened in the company, had been recorded. Yeah, that's the completeness. Completeness means all the transactions that should be recorded had been recorded. Okay, so the risk of omission is there in liability. So again, remember, whether it's accounts payable or taxes payable or salaries payable, it will have the same nature. So the main assertion that you will test will be completeness. The next one is of course occurrence, because you have to know whether that. Okay, but the occurrence is not really a major thing, because again, occurrence, the point of occurrence or testing occurrence will be whether the event that they had mentioned happened. Okay, so it's the opposite of completeness, because in completeness, what you're trying to test is all the transactions that occurred happened and been recorded. In occurrence is different. It's the other way around. All the transaction had been which had been stated really happened. Okay, so it's admitting that it happened. Most likely, okay, there will be possibilities that we may be, okay, again, may have forgotten the loans or borrowed money from our friend. I'm not blaming you. Is uh, human nature. Even me, I thought that I paid my aunt for. So I paid my aunt. Then I came here in Papua New Guinea, and then my sister reminded me, "Hey, have you paid our aunt?" No, I owe her money. Yes, 2 years ago. It's not my intention to forget, but it happens. Huh? Clear? So the risk of omission is there on payable. So what we will do? The first thing that you can do is so subsequent payments testing. So what we will do is we will test whether our client had paid some payables after balance date, which is not recorded during balance date. You got it? Huh? So it's like this. They are not admitting that they have loaned or borrowed money during 31st December. But why is it that they're paying something, loan or payable, after balance date? Again, they said, we don't owe that money to that individual, 31st December. Then, 4 days after the balance date, they are paying that same individual that we're questioning. So why they're paying? Are you willing to pay that you don't have any loan or borrowed money from your friend? You say, friend, I will pay you. Then your friend is trying to, why are you paying me? Oh, question, I will pay you. Is it possible? No. We only pay because we owed something, right? So if they are not admitting that they have a loan or payable during 31st December, the question is why they're paying after. Am I clear? So that is testing of completeness. Okay. Dear future auditors, no, you don't want to be auditor. It's more of like, why? Why do you need to pay? Why are you paying? Hey, will you pay if you don't owe? Huh? If you pay, I will be sitting beside you. No, the company will only pay because they need to pay. So if they're saying we don't owe this money to Mr. A, but 4 days after they're paying money to Mr. A, the question is why? So there's a payable. Clear? So they may have forgotten. What else? Another test is cutoff. In cutoff, now in cutoff testing, we just have to check whether the payable had been recorded on the correct reporting period. For example, uh, they purchased 100,000 kina worth of inventory, let us say 30th December, but they recorded it 2nd January. Take note, the transaction happened on 30th December, but they recorded it 2nd January. So that is wrong, okay? Because the recording should be done 30th December. So that is what we call cut-off testing. We have to test if they recorded it on the right accounting period. Okay. Accruals and provision, same. Okay, we just have to test whether those payables had been recorded. Now, this is important. The last portion on this payable. Yes, this is the last portion. Provisions. Okay. Any idea about provisions? What I'm talking about here? This? No? Okay. If not, I'll give you an idea. Provisions normally happens when uh, our client is somehow obliged to pay, but they don't know exactly how much and when. But definitely most likely they will, I'm saying the word, most likely they will pay. Okay, most likely means more than possible. May more than possible, which means more than 50%, maybe 60%, 70% possible. Okay. So, but we don't, or our client don't know when they will pay and how much they will pay, exactly how much they will pay. But they have estimated amount of how much they will pay. Okay. It's like this. There was we still have time. Okay. So there's a popular case in US. Okay. Where there is someone smoking and then riding a horse. You know those cowboys, then smoking. And then the commercial is saying you will be like that macho guy, and then the ladies will come to you, and then you will be attracted. This is the advertisement. This is the true advertisement. So one of the guys who watched this advertisement believe that he will be like that. When he smokes, he can ride the horse, and then the rope, and then catch the cow, and then to pull and then pull, and then and then he will be popular with the girls. This is a true case, and you can find it in internet. Okay. Then he sued that he got lung cancer because of too much smoking. It sounds funny, but that's actually what happened. I'm really sorry with that guy. Okay. But anyway, that is false advertisement, right? Okay. Then he sued this company. Hey, you said that I'll be like a cowboy guy, and then I'll be like this and this and this and this. I got lung cancer. Okay. He sued. So what happened? So this company needs to, and most likely they will lose the case. So that's what I'm saying about provision. Most likely they will lose the case, so they need to set like a provision. We call it provision. So that is setting like liability account, just anticipate how much they will pay. And then the lawyer will say, boss, with this kind of cases, the loss percentage will be around 70%. So most likely we will lose this boss. So that's why you need to set like money, how much you will pay. Then the company will ask, how much we will pay? Maybe around the 100 million kina, let us say 100 million kina. So they will put provision 100 million kina. Clear? Clear on that? So that's a liability account. Saying in the future, if they lost, they already set that possible provision or amount that they will pay in the future. Clear? All right. You search that in the internet. It's a really good story. There's another one, but that's McDonald's or something. I have lots of stories about it, but we don't have time. It's almost 4. All right. So how about other specialized accounts? Like we discussed about cash, receivables, payables, inventory, PPE, liability, like these things. So how about other accounts? Because we need to discuss also other accounts, right? Okay. For prepayments, those prepaid expenses. So what we will do is we will vouch those invoices and check expense slip, particularly on, let us say, insurance. Okay, if we bought an insurance for 1 year, let us say, but we bought it half year, we cannot charge the whole amount. Okay, remember that deferral and accrual principles of accounting. Okay, so you don't need to accrue the whole amount because you acquired it half year. So defer half of it for the next year. Investment. We can get external statements, which means if our client had an investment to another company, we just have to get that financial statements and calculate how much is the value of the investment. Right. Equity, verifying share register and retained earnings calculation. Okay, so few things. So 2 slides left. Now, responding to errors. Okay. Remember, errors compared with fraud is easy to correct because errors may be judgmental error or mechanical error. So, like maybe that sliding error. where instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, you wrote 1, 3, 2, 4. Okay, that's swapping of numbers. Okay, that's that's transpositional error. Sliding error is 1, let's say 1,000. Okay, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. But you wrote 1, 0, 0, so 1 0 missing. So they call slide error. So we have to find out what is the error. Is it mechanical error or judgmental error? When you say judgmental error, the application of accounting concept. Okay. And we have to identify if that error is exception. Exception means out of 100,000 transactions, there will be 1, 2 errors. So most likely those are exceptions. And then for those exceptions, we perform additional testing. So what really happened to those two out of the 100,000 transactions? Now, conclusion and standards reference, you can always refer to ISA 500 for your clarity on audit procedure and assertion. Okay. For this, particularly on substantive procedure, ISA 315, ISA 330, and ISA 500 will be important. Okay, because it talks about risk, assertion, and audit procedure. Okay. All right, so that's the end of my session today.